Other requests, I started to get custom work of people that had ideas that they wanted to do. So here was one where it was a small table, and they said, well, we have a vineyard, so we want these grape leaves to go around the perimeter, and we want this what's called a straw bale base. And that has a base that goes to this very, very narrow area. And the Buckmans were pretty tall, big people. You know, I think she was 6'1" and he was 6'4", so the table had to be, you know, a little bit larger. And they said, well, you know, what will happen if we both of us sit on the edge of the table? And I'm going 180, 240, 350, 400 pounds on the edge of this delicate table with a very delicate neck right here. No way, that's not going to work. It's going to break. So you have to come sometimes and combine other materials. This is a steel base with a pipe which is welded here that goes all the way up through this base to connect straight to the top. So you'll find that this column is hollow. It is actually where I put all the lead shot in there. So the table would be kind of anchored down, so if somebody sat on the edge it wouldn't tip over. So that table actually weighs a little over 400 pounds. Yeah, when they get ready to move it, that will be an experience. Now, there is a trap door on the bottom that we can take it out and empty everything out, but the idea was to get it anchored. One of my requests was, well, you're putting this in a dining room, is it on the ground floor, you know, is there a basement? They said, well, we have a basement. I said, well, you need to attend to some of the, you know, the support in the ceiling, just to be able to tolerate the weight of this table.
Does the top come off?
Yes. It unscrews. Matter of fact, that top of that iron pipe has a thread. I put a thread on it so I can actually spin that table on. And it's really strange when we spin it on. You know, there's threads on there, but as it does, it starts increasing in velocity as it goes down, just the weight, until it sort of goes whang and kind of anchors itself. So the top does come off, the base comes off, all these segments come apart. There's a trap door underneath, the metal comes out, everything comes apart.
You can lift it by the top?
Yes. Yeah, we made sure that we could lift it by the top.
Wow.
Yeah, 400 pounds. Yeah, we actually got 4 people up, and each one of us 100 pounds, and tried it, and says, well, you know somebody's going to try to lift it. You know that, you know, and try to lift it up by the top. It made
How big is the mounting flange?
The mounting flange, you know, I think the mounting flange right here was probably about 18 inches, an 18-inch octagon. And those are threaded inserts that go in, quite liberal use of threaded inserts. Now it's all going into Medex, so that was the weak point that I felt, that the Medex is a very dense type of MDF, exterior grade MDF. With phenolic glue, and it has pretty good holding power, but that would have been the weak points. I was worried about that ripping out. But you got to try it. You got to try it because you know it's going to happen. Again, the idea is no callbacks, no returns. So this was some of the imagery, and not only did they want marquetry, but they wanted stonework. Now, stonework is a whole different animal. Patience or difficulty with marquetry, as I teach people, on a scale from 1 to 10 is maybe a 3, maybe a 4. Stonework on a scale from 1 to 10 is about 12 to 15. Stonework has absolutely no forgiveness. You build pieces and they break. They don't inlay properly. They don't polish up the way that you want them to. Certain stones you simply want to stay away from. I found it was very challenging, and to do this entire top took as much time as that little bird did. So it's very time intensive. It's challenging, but the effect is nice.
And those are all natural stones?
Yes, all natural stones. No recons here. This is a sofa that was made out of some urban downfall. This is from walnut here. And this entire pattern here goes across the entire back. Now, for some of you that were in the class, you were wondering about larger patterns. How do you fit this pattern into a little 20-inch scroll saw? Well, I can break this packet apart in many pieces. For example, this is a part that I could take this part out. I have here a line plotted that will go right through the middle that I can almost saw the whole thing into 3 different packets. So I can work on each packet individually and then co-join them at the end. So here's the marquetry. Now let's kind of move in, and you can focus in on an area right here. So again, the sand shading. It got kind of busy over to the right, a little busy, a lot of parts, a lot of greens. But it did tend to work. Again, there's numbers on everything, 112, 113, 114, 116, and on it goes. So there was a few parts here. I made 3 of these patterns. 1 went on the sofa. I made a wall art piece which sold. The sofa sold, and I have 1 more sitting in a drawer somewhere waiting to be used. So with each cartoon, generally I have a couple of copies which are made simultaneously.
What kind of wood is that for the green?
The green, that was also tulipier. Yeah. This was a piece of furniture that I made for a client in Seattle. It's called the Wild Rose. So made 2 copies of it. And it's kind of, once you're doing one, you have your jigs and templates. How hard is it to make a second one? It's the development of the jigs, templates, drawings that take the time. So if I'm milling one out of walnut or one out of maple, I'll just mill another one out of mahogany. So the client got one and I got one, which I can sell, privately or at a later date. So this one had also, in the side, that was like a little, what? Oh.
That's amazing.
Oh, that, yeah. That's a silver wire, which is inlaid. It's also on a curved panel. And does anybody, okay, so people see the ladybug, but do you see where the spider is? Can you see the spider?
Claws.
Yeah, right there. He's waiting, waiting. Eventually he'll get lucky. Yeah, you just have to wait for that thing to crawl up here a little bit more. But the silver wire is actually inlaid with a very small micro router bit, and the silver is inlaid into the surface and then polished. So ecclesiastic work for temples, that usually involves bigger work. This has no marquetry, but we're starting to get into veneer. This cabinet here is 14 feet tall, and it has, you open the doors and there's these neon lights that are reflecting off of gold leaf in the back. Really, really amazing what happens. And neon is actually, what I discovered, neon is controlled lightning. That cabinet is housing 30,000 volts. You don't want to touch the wrong part there because it'll give you a little bit of surprise in that split second before you turn into a crispy critter. And but lightning, controlled lightning or neon reflecting off of gold leaf makes a very unusual light. So that's one effect that this particular designer wanted to achieve. I was just a hired gun that did all this.
What was the purpose of it?
What's that?
What was the purpose of it?
It's what's called an ark. It holds sacred scrolls. It's for a Jewish temple.
Holds the Torah.
Yeah, it holds a Torah. And this is a podium here, which was it had to be, the rabbi said, well, he needed to be able to control every aspect of what was happening in the church or out, and all security and everything there. So this thing is packed to the hilt with electronics. So it is these handles here solid bronze handles, and we needed to make it so a child could open up the cabinet here to gain entrance. So it couldn't be too heavy. So there's certain issues that we had to overcome, certain technical challenges. But it was an interesting technical challenge to actually, and these front doors are curved. There's arc up on top. There's lighting here that lights up this sculpture up on top. So there was a lot of stuff going on with this project. A lot of stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So other jobs come in like, we want this Duncan 5 table, but we want inlay around the perimeter that speaks to us in some way. So this is the fun as a designer. I get to play with things like that. Can everybody see what is, these are actually letters in the alphabet. And you can see all these different letters. There's what do you see here? There's C's, B's, I's, J's. So it spells all the members of this family. All the letters are in there. So by sand shading and by scroll sign, I'm able to get a number of different letters. See, each one looks a little bit different. So I got P's, B's, G's, J's, I's. I don't know. There's 16 different letters in this one. So that's really fun work. I enjoy that. So much of the work that I've done in the last 20 years has been what I would call spec pieces, speculative. There was a number of galleries that were carrying my work, Baltimore, Los Angeles, Seattle, and I would make a limited edition of pieces. And this was one. It was a cabinet that actually opened. And when it opens, lights come on. I would say that that's a display cabinet. And what I'm envisioning here, there's no hardware on the outside. You do it by grasping the top and you can spin this cabinet. And I would imagine like a good bottle of scotch, a really good one with 2 glasses in here. That's my idea of a good display cabinet. So 2 of them were sold. One of them I have back in my shop. It was on display. It was damaged, came back. And it's sort of sitting in my collection that's what's called my retirement fund. So eventually I'll have a show, release them, and they'll be able to support me in my declining years, or whatever that is. So this will spin all the way around 360. So there's a pivot up on the top and a lazy Susan down at the bottom. And the way that you take this cabinet apart is there's some fasteners up in here, and these 2 sides, this side and the opposing side, and this top will all come off, and it sleeves down and spins. So it's great to see people try to figure out how to open this cabinet. They know it opens, where you can guess that it does something, but they're afraid to kind of touch it. There's no hardware, and that was sort of this idea. Well, if you know how to open it up, then you're welcome to it. So you grasp the top, and there's a little catch, and you can spin it open. Yeah. Drawing this cabinet, the concept was there for many years, and I started drawing it. I really couldn't figure out how this whole arrangement at the bottom would look. So it was like gestating. Sometimes you'll have an idea about something, and I decided that I really needed to have it gestate. And that gestation period was 7 years long. I thought about it, and then I would start drawing it. No, I can't handle it. I'm going to back off here. Let me wait. So it went many years before I felt brave enough to actually do this piece. And I learned something on it. I planned for 4 of them. I lost 1 in production. I learned what, everybody knows what springback is in a lamination, right? When you do this curved lamination and you clamp it up on a form and it comes back and it kind of springs back a little bit. But what's spring forward? Well, I learned what spring forward is and how it's caused. That happened on this cabinet. So the first one that came out of the press shrunk down, the radius got tighter, which was intolerable as far as the mechanics were concerned. So it was in the method that I was using to laminate these different veneers together to make this plywood that caused that spring forward to happen, which made that cabinet, then that first one, I had to throw it away, had to burn it, because it just didn't work. So the learning process continues. So I'm doing a cabinet, you know, again, you know, you start doing your research. Somebody says, well, I want a jewelry armoire. So, okay, I'm going to start designing from various ideas. Let me see how this looks. So I was able to build a cabinet like this. And when it was at this stage, somebody else saw it and says, oh, that looks great. I want one too. And I go, where were you 4 months ago? You know, where I could have made both of them at the same time. So off you kind of, from the concept sketch, let's draw another one, and that one is now complete. This is a Hummingbird cabinet, where you can kind of see the 2 copies of the Hummingbird. One we'll use, and the other one was a spare. And that's the cabinet when it's fully complete. Started experimenting around with this idea of design through hardware placement. There's the cabinet here, but when it's, you know, you have the little male hummingbird up here, that is sort of an unusual layout for hardware. So I find that altering where the hardware goes sort of adds an extra little decorative element. This cabinet is way too busy for me, but it was the client's preference that they would have something here. There's secret compartments in here. There's all kinds of hidden latches. There's all this stuff which I'm not at liberty to show you where they are. But there's a bunch of stuff going on with this cabinet, which is, again, behind the scenes.
How long? I just estimate.
Oh, this and the other one, how many weeks? Probably, I would say probably about 4 months. Maybe not quite that much, maybe 3.5 weeks, maybe 4 months. At some point, you kind of look at your figures, you know, you shoot a figure out there. At some point, it becomes too depressing to look at your actual hours. And I just find it's healthier for me just to kind of focus on the finish line.
Only took a week.
I blew this out over 2 weekends, you know?
Yeah.
So if I can kind of go back from that, and usually that tallies at the end of the year. We kind of look at, you know, how much money did I make at the end of the year and how much money did I spend? So as it's going, I would say that I haven't made any money since 1986. At least that's what the IRS tells me, so that's fine. I don't pay taxes. Matter of fact, it looks like next year that, you know, sometimes, let's see, the bookkeeper made a mistake in 1993, and that year I paid like a few $1,000s in taxes, which, you know, the IRS promptly gave me back the next year. But the bookkeeper had made a mistake. Well, that's okay. It all goes around, comes around. Being a woodworker is, you know, how do you become a millionaire woodworker? Everybody knows that. You know how to be...
Very well.
No, millionaire woodworker, you start with 2 million. That's the best way to become a millionaire woodworker. So even here, sometimes it was difficult. I can say finally the paradigm has finally changed. I think 2 years ago, the IRS is starting to get some money from me now. So that's starting to work because my pieces are starting to sell for a bit more. What I would say is the furniture that I know that I've probably produced about 400 pieces of furniture. And at this point, I do know that they'll be worth a lot more to people if I'm dead. I know that, and that's just a fact. Sam Maloof rockers just went through the roof as soon as he died. So when you have clients that are calling you to inquire about your health, you have to kind of wonder. All right, so during the class we did this radial match, remember? For those people in class? Well, this is the whirlpool match or the slip match using quilted maple that really draws the eye into the center. It's a really effective use of quilted maple to do this spiral match. And this is for a table, it's a sushi table. This is the story of the big ugly fish that goes down to the center of the earth. It's an Inuit legend. And the way I'm designing it is when you put your hands on the table and you rotate it, 4 drawers deploy out on a cam system. So they pivot out on this hinge, they pivot out and you have 4 trays. So it's called a flower petal mechanic. It's not quite done yet. It's actually been on my table for a few years now. And I think I'm brave enough now At least I will be in 3 weeks, because I've told the client that they will get it by the end of the year, or I'll give them their money back. So that's what I did. I set that self-imposed deadline, because he said, whenever you have time to do it. That's the wrong thing to say to a furniture maker, isn't it? Or like if they pay you for the full table up front, that's also wrong. What incentive do you have to finish it? Absolutely none. So not only did he pay me for this 5 years ago, but he said, whenever. No, I went, no, I got to get it out of my shop. So make one with the jigs and templates. I'm making a second one.
So when you turn the table,
They all deploy. A quarter turn will allow those to deploy out. And then you turn it back and they all click back in. It works in theory. I'm really hoping it works in practice. Yes?
What is the expansion part for?
Because it's just so cool. I mean, it's like it's a sushi table. There's, again, no hardware on the outside of these drawers. The hardware is actually taking the table and spinning it.
Oh. Have you ever seen a Fletcher capstan?
Yes, I do. I have seen those things up close and personal. Now, you notice the Fletcher capstan table. You notice that when they do it, they're very clear about putting their hands on the top of the table and moving it around. When that apron comes up and seats, it will crush your finger to flat. So you have to be very careful with that table. The Fletcher capstan table is a great table, but it's a little pricey. What are they going for? It's about $700,000. Yeah, close to. Yeah, they're up there.
Well, if you got a $100 million yacht to put it on,
That's nothing. That's nothing. It's change. It's chump change. Yeah.
Oh, can you point out where the pivot point would
Oh,
be on those drawers?
the pivot point is right here. These tubes right here.
Gotcha. All right.
Those 4 places there that they have a hole that's drilled down through the bottom and the top. It's actually a metal tube, and there's a fastener that goes there. And this is the latching system for the cam, which engages with grooves which are underneath the top. So when you spin it, that actually, when the top spins on a rail, it's kind of centrally located. It will actually, these are door latch hardware. They engage in those grooves in the top that allow then all those drawers to come out. So to open these up, it's actually, I spin the table clockwise, and those things will actually move out on a rail. And in theory, it's going to work. At least the little mock-up I did, that worked. But
when you make these, every time you make something, you make more than one.
generally speaking, if I believe that it's a project that would gain wider audience, or I can market it in another way, I tell the client that I can make one, it's going to cost this much, but if I make 2, yours will be a little less, as long as I'm allowed to make another copy and market it and sell it. And usually people, if they want to save a couple grand, that would be a way to go. So I don't have a problem with that. So there are many pieces where I just don't do, I just do one, because it's very specific to that client, especially when it involves kind of ecclesiastic work or people that have a personal journey. Like there's this one man who was born Jewish and then he converted to Catholicism, which is an unusual transition. And he wanted a table that really spoke to that. So there's a Jewish 6-pointed star with John 3:16 on it. So there's a lot of stuff going in. I'm only going to make one of those. Nobody else is going to want this table. It's so unique and so different that it's unmarketable anywhere else. Okay, so marquetry with stones is a different facet. Is making marquetry or pictures with solid stone. For those people that have been over in Florence in Italy, this was a highlight of craftsmanship. 1600s, 1640, 1700s, again an 1800s revival. It's an art form which still exists, and I was really captivated by that. So I started introducing again stone into my pieces, like that little bird that we saw earlier. And it really was fascinating for me to really see stonework being used. Now this is mostly woodwork. You can see by sand shading that really looks quite realistic. And this is a 72-sided polyhedron. Table of Muses. This is a library table. A lot of gemstones and other things that are kind of drifting around. But this is a fun work, and actually this was all done with an 1.5-inch chisel. That entire image, which is about 4 inches in diameter, 180 pieces. I know, I've counted them. And this is built for a client that was the first copy that I made, and I brought him the skin, the veneer skin. I said, is this what you're looking for? And he looks at it, just takes one glance at it, and he goes, you know, down in, let's see, which quadrant was it? It was down here in some area right there. He says, well, there should be a different color veneer back through the other side, inside here, to make it realistic. So I had to go back and inlay 4 more pieces of wood into it. They're just slivers. I think it was back in here somewhere. But it's a it's fun. It's fun to think up these crazy ideas, work with clients to be able to make things. Yes.
How do you get your stone inlay flush with the veneer without going through the veneer?
The stone inlay is actually much thicker than the veneer because you can't get stone that's that thin. So I actually create the entire stonework. I make a recess for it and drop it actually 0.02 of an inch below the surface of the veneer. After the veneer is completely finished and sealed and the first coat of lacquer's on it. And then you're sitting above, you know, you have this bird thing, you have it marked out, and you have a drill bit here. And you say, well, I got to start it. You know, it's surprisingly hard to take one of your pieces of work and then put a drill bit right in there or a router and said, okay, I'm going to start routing for my inlay. The reason that it's 0.02 of an inch below is because lacquer sinks into wood, but it sits on top of stone. Also, if the stone is flush with the veneer, the wood and veneer and the MDF move seasonally, and it starts popping the stone out. After 10 years, that stone will be so proud of the surface that it'll break through the lacquer, and then degradation will happen very quickly. I know why all the efforts of stonework in the past and the Florentine guys, why it didn't work, why they didn't want to do it, because they would have problems. Now I have epoxies. I have routing techniques that they didn't have back then. I have diamond abrasives. So I have an advantage of the guys back in the 1600s. So I decided that that was a lot of trial and error. But I've discovered that over the years of how to do that. It's just a pain in the wazoo. This is slightly different, where this was an entire panel that was made out of stone. It's again for a little Torah. And I got the job because you know, they shopped around and various people, and you know, there's people in Italy that can do this. They can knock this stuff out. But they had some specific requirements. They gave me a chunk of a ruby this big. It was about 4 inches in diameter. And they said, well, we want to make pomegranates, or you know, it's real nice and red in there. We want to make the imagery of pomegranates out of this ruby, ziasite and aventurine. I said, well, rubies are really tough. They're really hard, and they're fractious, they're cantankerous. You can't push them around. Even for stone, they're difficult. They said, well, we want a stone panel. I said, okay, that's fine. And we want it in a door. I went, oh boy, can you imagine somebody slamming the door and all the pieces falling off? Okay, and what else? And they said, well, we want it to light up. And I said, well, light up. Oh, we're going to put a light here and then, you know, light it up. So they said, oh, no. We want that coming from inside the cabinet, like a stained glass. We want to see it. All right, so we put a light inside the cabinet, and I can laminate this onto glass, right? And it hasn't been done before. So, but you know, I can see where if I etch glass, tempered glass, if I etch it, sandblast it, I'll be able to glue it on with epoxy, clear epoxy, and I'll be able to see through the stone. Of course, how thick should the stone be? Well, as long as the stone is translucent, it works. So, well, you want to use some limestone here. I know that isn't porous. You can't push light through stone. It doesn't work. They said, well, that's what we want. You want to play ball or not? And I said, well, let me think about it. And I went, okay, great. I can do an experiment. I was able to get the ruby down to about 1/8 of an inch, or actually that was a little thicker, about 3/16 of an inch, and light would go through it. The aventurine, I could make a little bit thicker because it was a little more translucent. The Ziosite was fine. I was able to find out the thickness of Ziosite that would allow light to go through it. The limestone, I said, well, I'm going to use that to block the light and to give this outline. Light is not coming through here so you can see the image. Yes, I can do it. And I said, well, I'm going to mount a light inside the cabinet. And so, oh, no, no, no. We can't see the source of light. Okay, how are you going to make light that shines from within and you don't see the source of it?
Edge light it.
Couldn't edge light it because the edge light it doesn't, you can't get light to go through stone sideways. It just doesn't work. It's not like glass and etching. What's that?
Electroluminescent panel, possibly?
Electroluminescence, LEDs, yes, in the door. And I said, okay, that's great. I'll just be able to put lights or LEDs inside the door and it'll project light through. As well, how many LEDs? And I said, well, I figure about 500 LEDs in there should do the trick. And people say that LEDs don't produce heat, but when you get 500 of them in again, they produce a lot of heat. So there's actually a little fan that operates up here that's exhausting the heat from it. And so, well, to do... What's that?
How thick is the door?
Well, the door is Bombay. At least there's a flat section here and it's Bombay on either side. And there's enough space inside that door that I could actually put that LED panel, the computer fan, all this and mount it. So I said, okay, I think I can do it. And I said, I just need like a little cable, little flexible cord that goes from the cabinet. And oh, we can't see any cords. So how did I get juice to the panel? So that's the top right there. Actually, let me go back here. Through the hinges. Through the hinges, exactly. So there's 4 hinges that hold this door. And that was a single glue up. I used every clamp in the shop to make this as solid as possible. I cannot afford to have any flex, otherwise the stone will break, even if you slam the cabinet door. So it goes through the hinges. So I had to drill up through the case and fasten it to the hinge. As long as nobody does this, we're fine. We're fine. It's like, and who's going to do that? Well, I don't know, but just don't, So that actually worked. It's still working.
Light up.
What's that?
They might light up.
They would light up. Yeah, well, they did. So
LEDs, you should have been able to use low voltage.
32 volt at the time. That was the only thing that I could do. But you can still feel it because we have to really punch a lot. To light up 500 LEDs and a computer fan and all the rest of it. There's a little bit of power going through there. I could feel it when I did this.
Oh, yeah.
I can definitely feel it.
So it's UL certified?
Yes, of course. Of course, yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't say, but we don't want a fan.
Yeah, right. That was a non-negotiable at that point. And during installation, I had all the transformer and stuff is in the bottom here. So when it got to the place, there's all these people and they're installing it. I didn't want to go to Miami to install it. I said, you guys just go in, it's a plug and play thing. So they put it into the alcove. I get this phone call, panic. It's like, it's not working. It's not working. I mean, we plugged it in. It's not lighting up. What do we do? And I go, okay, well, let's, give me the electrician. There was 2 electricians there. There was a designer. There was the client. There was a client sponsor. Everybody was a big unveiling. The thing doesn't work. Yeah. I said, first of all, try this. Is it working here? And they said, no, we're not getting any juice. And I go, okay. Is it plugged in? Then you hear this collective over the phone. Ah, and I go, great, okay. Actually, it was plugged in, but they needed to plug in the transformer this way instead of this way. There was a plug, but they had the polarity switched, which I'm glad it didn't blow anything else out because that could have been disastrous. That was for a spat of work that I did for a particular designer. And I've done several cabinets like this, but this was definitely the most complex and nerve-wracking one that I've done.
How tall is that? Is that like roof size?
About 4 feet, so it's small. Small. It looks a little bit larger, but it's actually 54 inches tall. And those are rubies with gold findings in the tiara. There's the blowholes for the computer. That's where hot air is coming out, and from inside the door. Yeah, so it's.
Sand shape.
What's that?
What do they use it for?
They hold a Torah. inside. They hold a sacred scroll inside. And it was also another concern. Well, it's not going to get too hot inside the cabinet. And I said, well, that's why I'm having a computer fan. Then went, oh, okay, good. We'll put up with a little, little whisper fan that's inside of there. Yeah. So let's kind of look a little bit in veneer outside the box. Dynamic art, sculpture, clothing. What's veneer doing in clothing? Wooden clothing. What's that all about? I kind of looked at it. Well, there's the dress. This is David Walker's dress from Alaska. Spruce Girls. That was 1929. The only thing I understand is that the bathing suits sort of were a little splintery. So that was a little bit of an issue for them. It wasn't... yeah, it would float. That's right. But that, some of the wood veneer fashion that has been done before in the past, I found kind of boring. So I decided that I was going to give it a try too. So taking veneer and laminating it onto silk made it pliable and not break, where we were able to actually take something like this and bend it around. So the problem was, how do I fasten it? How do I get it together? What's going to be unique and maybe something off the shelf? So started the search for different hardware, designing things. It was a very intense designing project. I was looking at cummerbunds, fasteners, scuba hardware, busks of corsets. And I decided really there was nothing else to do except I had to make it myself. That looks scary, doesn't it? That's brass and rosewood and cutting it with a table saw. What I learned there is I changed fences because I actually had a thin piece make it through there. And thankfully I was standing to one side of the table saw, and it made a nice little neat hole way in the back of the shop. So my wife bought me a leather apron. She said that wasn't a good thing to do. We were able to make the hardware and fasten it on here, and it's very flexible. And with the fair leads, we were able to make this dress, which is mostly wood. Silk hump here, veneer inside the slats, veneer worked, veneer shoes, little turned beads. Yes, it was fun to do. It's it's very flexible. From what I'm told, it's very comfortable. It has gone on a world tour. It's been on a runway in New Zealand, in Las Vegas, in Seattle, and is currently on its way to New York. So we'll see what happens with it. It was sort of a little side project that was kind of fun, and we decided to throw a little headdress in there. No, this was one show that was in Santa Barbara. It did pretty well. I enjoyed it. So that's we're actually working on the second one right now. It's a full-length quilted maple gown. We were able to finally be successful making the harness, which is actually a thin strip of wood that will hold the entire garment. After several tries, we have a form in the shop that we were working with, and that has been a real big challenge. Probably one of my most interesting challenges yet is how do you get veneer to comply to the human form? And it involves three-dimensional veneering, doing things outside the box, compound curves. This kind of thing is really a cutting edge of how do you get a veneer to bend both directions? How do you get it to be flexible? How do you get this kind of sculptural form? So we're learning an awful lot right now. So, woodworking seminars, what am I doing here? I'm building stuff. I like to build stuff. I like to see other people build stuff. There is different things that people can do, and watching the lights come on and having people do things and be creative and have the lights come on and have a new skill set to be able to do, to have in their pocket, to be able to do things for their kids or for their clients. It's been a very interesting, a fun journey. It continues on. Doing stone marquetry now. I'm doing that in October up in Indiana. So this is building also furniture with it, starting to do more furniture building, more woodwork, and incorporating it also in with the marquetry skills. It's what I seem to be doing more and more of these days, But when I compare also these classes, and this is actually my own shop, this is more of an advanced class where people were making big tables, small tables, and all this is created in the period of 5 days, 4 days actually. This is on the morning of the 5th day. By the end of the day, his table was completely glued up. So it's a look at it as really a way for people to express their artistic talent and to create things where they didn't believe that creation was possible. So with that, I can say, I hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you.